Section 4 of the Diary of a Dead Officer by Arthur Graeme West. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 4. Diary. In the trenches. Living for the moment. In and out of the trenches. Points of view. Atheism. Utterances of a German prince. In and out of the trenches again. The common view. After the attack. Special course of training in France. In September 1916 West returned to France as an officer. The extracts in this part cover the time from his arrival in the trenches until his death in April 1917, a period during which he was continuously in France. The diary ends with a couple of extracts describing his happiest time in the Army while undergoing a course of training at an officers' school. In the trenches. Sunday, September 17th, 1916. A tedious morning in the trenches prompts me to write down experiences and trivial little events which ordinarily I would not value enough to record, simply to pass the time. The trenches I am in are near G, were originally German and have been recently captured by the British. I have not been really in the trenches for a long time, and find the renewal of the experience particularly trying. We got up here about 2:20 a.m. Sunday morning, a terribly long relief, for we started out for this line from G Ridge at 8:30 p.m. Saturday night. The men were dog-tired when they got here, and though ordered to dig, complied very unwillingly, and were allowed to sit about or lean on their spades, or even to stand up and fall asleep against the side of the trench. It was a smelly trench. A dead German, a big man, lay on his stomach as if he were crawling over the parades down into the trench. He had lain there some days, and that corner of trench reeked even when someone took him by the legs and pulled him away out of sight, though not out of smell, into a shell-hole. We sat down and fell into a comatose state, so tired we were. On our right lay a large man covered with a waterproof, his face hidden by a sandbag, whom we took to be a dead Prussian Guardsman, but the light of dawn showed him to be an Englishman by his uniform. From where I sit I can see his doubled-up knees. The men lay about torpidly until 4:30 a.m., when B ordered a stand to. We tried to keep awake merely for form's sake, while the light very slowly grew. Stand down went at 5:30, and B made us tea, and added rum for the others. The very smell of rum makes me sick, because it is connected with the trenches last winter. One always feels better with daylight. Of this kind of life alone is the psalmist's saying true, in ordinary modern life, where unhappiness consists so much in mental agitation, it is startlingly false. We joke over the tea and biscuits, go into the next bay and talk to the men about the German things they have found, and are determined to get home somehow. A rifle, a belt buckle with Gott mit uns on it, a bayonet, and so on. We try and make out where we are on the map, and find we are at least 1,000 yards away. Then we resolve that as we had practically no sleep last night nor the night before, and I had little even the night before that, we will try and get some. We lie. Wednesday, September 20th, 1916. So far I had written, when it became evident that our quiet Sunday was to be of the usual kind, and we were to be bombarded. H.E. shells, about 6-inch ones, came over with a tremendous black smoke, making an explosion and sending up a column of earth about 30 feet high. The first intimation I had was when I went round the corner to the next bay to see where one had fallen, and found a man with a little ferrety nose and inadequate yellow moustache, in a very long greatcoat, sitting muttering away on the firing step like a nervous rabbit, and making vague gestures with his hands and head. He would return no answer to questions, and I was told 2 men had just been buried in a dug-out near by. I went round and found 2 more pale men, rather earthy. I talked to them and did my best to comfort them. A few more shells came over, unpleasantly near, but it was not yet certain whether they were definitely after us. Soon this was clear. They worked down a winding trench and blew in the walls. We lost 6 men by burying and 10 others wounded or suffering from shell shock. It was horrible. A whistle would be heard, nearer and nearer, ceasing for a mere fraction of a second when the shell was falling and about to explode. Where was it coming? Men cowered and trembled. It exploded, and a cloud of black reek went up. In the communication trench again. You went down it. 2 men were buried, perhaps more, you were told, certainly 2. The trench was a mere undulation of newly turned earth. Underneath it somewhere lay 2 men or more. You dug furiously. No sign. Perhaps you were standing on a couple of men now, pressing the life out of them on their faces or chests. A boot, a steel helmet, and you dig and scratch and uncover a grey, dirty face, pitifully drab and ugly, the eyes closed, the whole thing limp and mean-looking. This is the devil of it, that a man is not only killed, but made to look so vile and filthy in death, so futile and meaningless that you hate the sight of him. Perhaps the man is alive and kicks feebly or frantically as you unbury him. Anyhow, here is the first, and God knows how many are not beneath him. At last you get them out. 3 dead, grey, muddy masses, and 1 more gibbering live one. Then another shell falls, and more are buried. We tried to make them stand up. It is noticeable that only 1 man was wounded. 6 were buried alive. I shall always remember sitting at the head of this little narrow trench, smoking a cigarette and trying to soothe the men simply by being quiet. 5 or 6 little funk holes dug into the side of the trench served to take the body of a man in a very huddled and uncomfortable position, with no room to move, simply to cower into the little hole. There they sit like animals for market, like hens in cages, one facing one way, one another. One simply looks at his hands clasped on his knees, dully and lifelessly, shivering a little as a shell draws near. Another taps the side of his hole with his finger-nails, rhythmically. Another hides himself in his greatcoat and passes into a kind of torpor. Of course, when a shell falls onto the parapet and bores down into the earth and explodes, they are covered over like so many potatoes. It is with the greatest difficulty that we can shift the men into another bit of trench and make them stand up. I found myself cool and useful enough, though after we had been shelled for about 2½ hours on end, my nerves were shaky, and I could have cried for fright as each shell drew near, and longed for nothing so much as to rush down a deep cellar. I did not betray any kind of weak feeling. It was merely consideration of the simple fact that a shell, if it did hit me, would either wound me or kill me, both of which were good inasmuch as they would put a pause to this existence, that kept me up to my standard of unconcern. And the more I experience it, the more fear seems a thing quite apart from possible consequences. which may occur in a person even when he assents fully to the proposition I have noted above. I feel afraid at the moment. I write in a trench that was once German, and shells keep dropping near the dug-out. There is a shivery fear that one may fall into it or blow it in. Yet what do I fear? I mind being killed, because I am fond of the other life, but I know I should not miss it in annihilation. It is not that I fear. I don't definitely feel able to say I fear the infliction of pain or wound. I cannot bind the fear down to anything definite. I think it resolves itself simply into the realisation of the fact that being hit by a shell will produce a new set of circumstances so strange that one does not know how one will find oneself in them. It is the knowledge that something may happen with which one will not be able to cope, or that one's old resolutions of courage, etc., will fail one in this new set of experiences. Something unknown there is. How will one act when it happens? One may be called upon to bear or perform something to which one will find oneself inadequate. The shelling went on this Sunday, I mean, for about 5 hours, and we had a few biscuits and a tot of whisky about 1 o'clock. By then the whole of the little communication trench had been battered by successive shells, and we had left off going down it after each one, as the Germans had turned machine gun fire on to the levelled portion of trench. We stood, B, G, BL and I, in the only undamaged bay, eating and drinking, and watching the huge columns of earth and smoke as the work of destruction went on. They had worked rather off this particular trench, and the men still stood all about it, but I believed for certain that they would return towards the end and smash in the only bay to which they would naturally have hoped to have driven us. I had had enough whisky to enable me to view this prospect with nothing but interested excitement, and really did not flinch as the shells fell, seemingly groping their way towards their mark. Just as they drew near, a runner from the X's came down to say the Germans had broken through on their left and were attacking. Would we look after the third line and the flank? This news woke us all up from this rather unreal alertness of impending destruction, and we rushed off with rifles, bayonets, and all manner of weapons to man the trench. No foe appeared, but it cheered us, and they did not shell very much more that night. The strain of the whole thing was very much worse than anything we had ever had at the B section. Living for the moment. Tuesday, November 23rd, 1916. A grey, warmer day. The sun looked through only for a minute or two in the afternoon. We went in the evening to an estaminet on the left. After that CL and I walked down the road under the moon, and talking to him then I grew more convinced of the brutalising process that was going on. How impossible it was to read even when we had leisure. How supremely one was occupied with food and drink. CL himself said he had found the same on his first campaign. It took him 3 weeks to get back to a state where he could read, and so it is. All my dreams of the days after the war centre round bright fires, armchairs, good beds, and abundant meals. In and out of the trenches. Monday, September 25th, 1916. A better village than we have been in yet, on the A river. Poplar lanes and water meadows and red sunsets, calm and chilling. Moved to the sea, in a valley with a camp in it about 7 miles this side of M. A comfortable night there. Tuesday, September 26th, 1916. Moved at 8:30 towards the front. Everybody rather fed up and tired. Reached a shell-torn ridge just near G about noon, and stayed there till 6 p.m. eating, drinking and sleeping. Then moved up to occupied trenches near M. A quiet enough night, but not much sleep. Wednesday, September 27th, 1916. The French came up behind us in large numbers, very active and talkative. Daylight showed a fearful lot of dead Germans round the trench, and an appalling shambles in the dug-outs. A fairly quiet day, sunny. The French moved about all over the valley regardless of anything. We had 2 good meals. We were relieved at night by the French. Thursday, September 28th, 1916. Left trenches at about 4:30 a.m. Fearfully tiring march back to C, where we lived in a kind of manhole in the trench. B, BL and I had one to ourselves, and our valises with us. Slept and fed. Read Scholar Gypsy and Thyrsis, and talked about Oxford together at night. These 2 are the only valuable men among the officers of the company. Friday, September 29th, 1916. Rainy and depressing. Up to trenches again by T Wood. 7 men killed by a shell as soon as we got in the trench. Beastly sight. I went up to find the way at G at night. I got back to find the Buzzard's cake. Jolly evening. Slept on the floor of a dug-out. Stomach troubles. Points of view. Atheism. Saturday, September 30th, 1916. Walked through D Wood with B. Wood in an unspeakable mess. The fields are all over dandelion and vetch here. The sun, of course, is in the April-May position again. Wrote to M, C and N. We moved back a few hundred yards to B Wood and slept in a rough bivouac. I was very warm and comfortable. It is notable that to-night we discussed ever so slightly the problems of atheism. I had pronounced a few days ago that I was an atheist, and after a few of the usual jabs at Balliol the thing passed off. To-night I said something about my being a respectable atheist, to which it was promptly answered that there could be no such thing, and people said, "You aren't really an atheist, are you?" Thus we see how men cannot get out of their minds the horrid atheist idea, the idea that intellectual convictions of this sort must of necessity imply some fearful moral laxity. The most religious men are really the extreme Christians or mystics and the atheists. Nobody can understand this. These 2 classes have really occupied their minds with religion. Utterances of a German Prince. Sunday, October 1st, 1916. A fine morning. Wrote to C. We built a kind of shelter during the day and had a pleasant day altogether, good meals, but never quite enough. Peace came near to-night in several ways, and filled us with a happy contentment as we went to bed in our shelter with plenty of candles. Warmth and a misty autumn night, fairly quiet too for the front. I received to-day a memorandum about Bertrand Russell, telling of a course of ledtures he would give, and containing a statement by himself of what the War Office had recently done to him. It showed the strength of the conscientious objector and pacifist movement, even in this welter of brute force. Then I read of an article by a German, Prince H., on the necessity of at once stopping the war, making the usual and obvious points very well. It was good to find a German and a prince speaking so wisely. S., an officer here from Oxford, nonconformist and, I think, religious, came back from a machine-gun course and remarked half ashamedly that he had really come to the conclusion since he had been away that the war was really very silly and we all ought to go home. Nobody took any notice of what he said, or else treated it laughingly, but I saw he meant it and really had seen something new. It had come to him as a definite vision, and he was a bit disquieted. This is as it should be, and I must get talking to him. In and out of the trenches again. Monday, October 2nd, 1916. Rain. Read Tristram Shandy with much pleasure. New Age came. We sang jollily in our bivouac at night, B., G., and I. We slept well. S. took a carrying party which didn't return till 5:30 a.m. G. came back and brought a bottle of whisky with him. Tuesday, October 3rd, 1916. Rain. Went in search of a canteen with G. and failed to find one. Started at 3:30 in the afternoon to go up in support. Didn't arrive at our right trench till 2:30 next morning. Misty and cold. Very tired. Wednesday, October 4th, 1916. Rain all morning. We sat and sang. Went out at night, very fatigued. G. came in with a working party at 7 a.m. on Thursday morning. We were in bivouac at T Wood. He had great trouble with the men. The Common View. Thursday, October 5th, 1916. Dull. I observed several more features in the common opinions concerning the war. G. said, "Fancy all this trouble being brought on us by the Germans." Universal assent. Then B., the captain, remarked that it was really very silly to throw pieces of lead at one another, and from this someone developed the idea that our civilisation was only a surface thing, and we were savages beneath the slightest scratch. What no one seems to see is that our country may be at any rate partially responsible, or that those who, like conscientious objectors, refuse to debase themselves to the level of savages are worthy of any respect, intelledtually if not morally. One observes again the "it had to be" attitude which Hardy notes about the d'Urberville family. So it is. People will not really move a finger to mould even their own lives outside the rules of the majority or public opinion. No one sits down to consider the rightness of his every action, and his judgments on political action he takes from the papers. Independent judgment in private or public affairs is the rarest thing in the world. We did nothing all day but rest. I read Tristram Shandy and wrote letters. SOS signals came through at night just at dinner and perturbed us somewhat. They were soon cancelled. Friday, October 6th, 1916. Fair. Arrangements made for an attack to-morrow. I was left out. I was very glad to go. Reached the transport lines about 7 p.m. and had a good dinner and sleep. Saturday, October 7th, 1916. Went off to C by lorry. Saw B walking along the road near T and had lunch with him and his ambulance. C is a delightful town. quite small but compact and efficient. I bought butter and cheese and fruit, and had tea at an excellent small patisserie. A kind of large paved hall in the fashion of the Dutch pictures gave off from behind the shop, and one fed at tables round it. There were cages of canaries there that sang lustily, and a few great dogs. These sounds, combined with laughter, quick talk, and the song of girls echoing in the spacious area, were the most pleasant thing that I had heard. I left C about 4:30 and got back about 7. Battalion attacked. After the attack. Sunday, October 8th, 1916. News came through on this day of heavy rain and wind of our losses in the attack. Very heavy. B, L, and BL all killed. B a good Blighty. G dangerously wounded. I never felt more utterly sick and miserable than to-day. We moved up at midnight to B Wood to await the battalion's return from the trenches. They were very glorious when they came, but arrived at the sandpits near M a very tired crowd, about 1:30 p.m. Sunday, October 15th, 1916. Moved from M. It was very pleasant there in some ways. Dinner was good with O, the doctor and parson. Not bad arguments, and a good deal of freedom. I, being the only man outside headquarters who has any idea of logical abstract argument, was in the more favour. The parson I like. He has wit and a pleasing frankness. The doctor is feline, almost Jewish and strokeable. Friday, November 3rd, 1916. I sit on a high bank above a road at H. By my side stands a quarter of a bottle of red wine at 1½ francs the bottle. The remaining 3/4 are in my veins. I am perfedtly happy physically, so much so that only my physical being asserts itself. From my toes to the very hair of my head I am a close compact unit of pleasurable sensations. Now indeed it is good to live. A new power, a new sensibility to physical pleasure in all my members. The whistle blows for "Fall in." I lift the remnant of the wine to my lips and drain the dregs. All the length of the march it lafts me, and the keenness, the compactness, the intensity of perpetual well-being doesn't even leave my remoteil finger-tips. The silver veil of gossamer webs surround my hair, the juice of the autumn grape gladdening all my veins. I am the child of Nature. I wish always to be so. Special course of training in France. Saturday, February 10th, 1916. The course at F, which I entered on at the beginning of January, is now over. About 20 of us in one mess at an inn in the Rue de Th were my principal companions. They were of all regiments, 3 or 4 Australians, 2 Scotchmen, 2 Guardsmen, and the rest mainly North Country. Here, as usual, is the same lesson to be learnt about men in the lump. They were all very nice, and couldn't understand me. They thought I was a pro-German, a Socialist, and a poet. Any one who isn't at once intelligible is put down at any rate as the first of these. They are all full of petty, narrow loyalties to regiment or county. I think North Country people are more intensely narrow and venomous in this way. They are all rather against America, or were when Wilson was beginning his negotiations, and talk of Yanks and yellow races. I don't think they give much thought to anything. They argue by assertions proclaimed louder than their opponents. A gramophone has occurred during the last day, and they play the Bing Boys. But how I love them all! It is 5 o'clock and the light has just been turned on. R and I have spent the day since 9 a.m. waiting for buses up at the back gate of the White Chateau. Bus after bus, with lorries too, has come up, some with officers and men for the following course, all covered with white dust, but very happy to have got here. Their kits are wheeled off in barrows by their servants into the billets where we have been sleeping for 5 weeks. We stand about and talk to other officers, go for slow walks out on the E or A road. We talk of ourselves, of our natures and moods, of what we would do if we were home. We tell one another what we were doing before the war, of our friends. R tells me about his wife. We confide our dreams to one another. We talk of the other people in the mess and of the men in our own battalions. It is a sunny day, and against the walls and in sheltered places the heat is pleasant. Out on the E road the whole of F lies before us. A mist is gathering over it from the surrounding hills and from the chimneys of the jute factory. Little girls pass and repass through the crowd of officers with quiet, happy eyes. I am very happy. I love all the men, and simply rejoice to see them going on day by day their own jolly selves, building up such a wall of jocundity around me. End of section 4